Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. It's a cloudy yet beautiful day, at least for us here in Toronto. Super excited for today's presentation. My name is Nurul Vora. I'm the Charity Marketing Manager here at Canada Helps, and I am happy to be joined by our fellow Canadian friend, Brady Josephson from the NextAfter Institute on today's presentation on 7 ways to optimize your fundraising emails. Brady is going to walk us through donors' email behaviors, strategies, and touch points gleaned from analyzing emails from over 152 Canadian charities. You will learn about the 7 essential tactics to optimize your emails for appealing to your donors and raising more online. And this includes what you can do to increase the likelihood of someone opening and reading your email, how you can raise more money with effective email appeals, and what role a donation page plays within a fundraising email. There will be a question and answer period at the end to address any burning live questions you may have during the course of today's presentation. So before I hand it over to Brady to get things started, let's just go over some quick housekeeping slides. So for those of you who are new to Canada Helps, welcome. We build online fundraising tools to empower and help charities become more self-sustainable. For charities, we offer open access to our full suite of affordable online giving tools with full donor information. We also provide educational resources so charities can better understand their donors and steward them along their journey. For donors, we have offered a convenient, safe, trusted destination for donating to and fundraising for all registered Canadian charities for more than 19 years. More than 2.5 million Canadians have donated over $1 billion through Canada Helps. And to date, over 22,000 charities across Canada rely on Canada Helps fundraising tools to build capacity. Now, if you're having trouble hearing me, please try turning up your computer's volume. If that doesn't work, click Sound Check under your GoToWebinar panel, select the Speaker tab, and then turn the volume on Speaker tab to the far right for maximum volume. For the best webinar experience, please close all other applications. And yes, we'll email you a link to the webinar recording and slides within the next 24 hours, so you don't have to worry about that. Please note that you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. If you have any questions, just type them into the question logs of your GoToWebinar panel at any time. We'll go through your questions over the course of the presentation and address them during the Q&A portion of the presentation. So without further ado, would like to introduce Brady to kick things off. Brady is the Managing Director of NextAfter Institute, where he performs original research, develops evidence-based resources, and provides data-driven training to help organizations raise more money to fund their life-changing work. Thank you so much for joining us, Brady. Please take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everyone for showing up and coming out. I got a lot to get through and I go pretty fast. So hopefully there's a lot in here. Please ask a lot of questions. And as Nurul mentioned, you will get the slides and recording afterwards. So I'm here to talk about how you can optimize your fundraising emails. And first, I actually want to start with a little quiz. Nothing like a little quiz to get your afternoon for most of y'all. Was out west, so you're still in the morning, but either way, let's start with a quiz. I'm going to show you 3 real experiments with real nonprofits on email fundraising, and you're going to see 2 different versions, an A and a B, and you're actually going to just vote which you think raised more money in this case. So for example, here's email A and email B. Give you a second to kind of look at them. Some of them are pretty quick to see the differences. So you can see email A, you can see email B, and I think we're actually going to pull up a poll here so you can vote. Which of these 2 emails do you think raised more money, version A or version B? I'll give you a second to fill that out. A or B, which raised more money? All right, 88% of you said version A. I'll show you the results here in about 30 seconds or so. I got 2 more experiments to show you. Here's another one. This is an email. This is testing who the email is actually coming from. You can see option A is from a person named Kent Lassman, and option B is the organization name. That's the difference here. So from a person A or from an organization B, which email do you think led to more opens in this case? Option A or option B? Which led to more opens? Option A or option B? What say ye? Option A, this is a little bit closer. 64% said A, 36% said B. And then the last experiment here, this one comes from Texas State Historical Association. So it is a US organization, but the campaign here is sending an email, going to a landing page. And you can see here in option B, version B, the difference is it has a video. It has a video in the email and a video on the donation page that it's pointing to. That's the big difference here. So which do you think raised more money here? Option A, no video, or option B with a video? What do you think? Option A, option B, video, no video. This one's overwhelming video. All right, thank you for participating in that quiz. Let's see how y'all did. So I actually just moved to Texas 2 weeks ago, and the best part is I get to say y'all all the time. It's such a handy phrase, so you're gonna hear it more throughout. And if I mix in a few A's as well, I'm just gonna have this crazy accent. Anyways, experiment A, email B. Most of y'all, 88%, voted option A, but in fact, option B increased donations, in this case, 272%. What about the second experiment, sending from a person, sending from an organization? It was a little bit closer, and if you guessed A this time, you were correct. 28% increase in email opens by sending your email from an individual, not the organization. And the last one, where 91% of people said option B with the video would raise more money. Here's what we found. It did increase click-throughs, but I was asking about donations, and it actually decreased donations 81% by including a video. So here's the key point, is y'all don't know. Y'all don't know, and the thing is, neither do I. This is why it's so critical and imperative that we spend time doing research and especially running experiments to see how donors behave. You and I, fundraisers, marketers, are very bad at predicting donor behavior. We're also pretty bad at predicting our own behavior. So this is really what our mission is about. How do we decode what works in fundraising and then make it as accessible to as many charities and nonprofits as possible? And we do that through this applied research. We run tons of experiments. Other people send us their experiments. We look at them and analyze them to see what's working, what are donors responding to. We'll also actually go out and sign up for emails, make donations, become a donor or a subscriber ourselves, and analyze that process, see what types of email communications we get, score them, analyze them, categorize them. And then we also are looking at academic research. What are people learning and thinking and saying about human behavior in terms of why we make the decisions that we do? And what we're trying to do is line up these things to say, well, what we can see that nonprofits are doing or not, what we know that donors are responding to or not, and what we know about human behavior. Here's where we should really be focusing on our fundraising. And then we try to turn that into resources and training and research and all that kind of stuff. You can find it at our website. So that's kind of what's going into this. And hopefully you're at this point now, it's like, oh boy, I don't know what works in email. Well, I'm going to share some of these high-level lessons when we look across all of our research. And here's one of them, is the more personal looking, sounding, and feeling an email is, the more likely you are to get donations. This is, if you have a pen and paper, if you're looking for tips, this is at a high level. Hopefully a key takeaway for you today is how can you make your emails look, sound, and feel more personal? If you can do that, you're probably on a good path to better engagement and more donations. Another critical thing to keep in mind, as we actually saw in those experiments, is you need to be thinking about what leads to donations, not just clicks or opens. Now, I know that can be really difficult with different tools, and do they connect to one another, and how do you track a click through a donation? But often what gets you a click isn't the same thing that actually gets you a donation. So we have to be very careful with what we're optimizing for. And generally speaking, to raise money online in North America, the more good emails you send to the more engaged people, the more money you'll raise online. It's not true all the time. I'm not just saying just start blasting emails, but generally speaking, the kind of healthier, more engaged people you have to send to, and the more quality emails you send, the more money you raise online. It's a general rule of thumb. And again, this isn't based on just because Brady says so. This is what we look at when we see the data and benchmark studies in Canada and the US, where does revenue come from? And email as a channel is often the highest that we see in terms of where revenue comes from. And it's really driven by a conversion rate. So conversion rates, what's the percentage of people that go on to make a donation that visit from that particular email channel or source? In this case, you can see how traffic from email converts at about 4.67% rate, which is actually 160% higher than the next closest channel. And again, if you think of email versus some of these other channels, in theory, you know who you're emailing. You know details about them, you know their past giving history, you know their name, you know a lot about them that you can personalize and customize your email and talk very specifically. Whereas if you're coming from social or referral, you don't actually know all that information. So it makes sense that email is a very high converting channel, which leads to high revenue, because there's some very unique things that we have at our disposal with email that we don't have with other strategies. So now one of the things that we've been asking ourselves, and many people have been asking us in North America and across the world, is, well, what does this mean about now in COVID-19? What's changed? What's not? And so one of the things that we actually put together with Canada Helps and Charity Village and Care2 is this resource looking at trends in terms of online giving provided by Canada Helps, and then email provided by us in our study that we've looked at. Is how is it trending over time? Is it up or down? What are organizations seeing as it relates to online fundraising? So I just want to share a couple of key data points to add some, data to the conversation about what's happening right now, what we're seeing. If you look at this, online giving in 2020 was already growing above what it was in the past, but particularly in the past few months, look at how March, April, and May are all growing more significantly. Now, this is Canada Helps Online Giving Index, and it's going to take more to explain, but at a simple level, 100 is how quickly online giving was growing for the 12 months leading up to January 2017. So anything over 100 means that it's growing faster than that time period. Anything under 100 means it's growing slower. So when we see these numbers that are higher than 100, it means it's growing faster. And then when we compare it month to month, we can still see the relative growth compared to that baseline, right? So what you're seeing here is online giving was growing, and it's really started growing really since COVID-19, the pandemic really started to hit. We also saw this across almost every vertical. You'll see that one red arrow there in international, and every single Canadian province, we've seen online giving growing. So again, it's not, some assumptions early on were, social service and welfare, of course they'll grow because they're on the front lines, but what we're actually seeing is every single vertical has been growing on the online side. It's not just some, although there was that small decrease in international. And a lot of the giving has actually been fueled by people being more generous. So when we look at average gift trend, we can see that 2020 was already slightly ahead of 2019 when it comes to the average online gifts. But again, particularly March, April, and then a little come down in May, a significantly greater average gift, which is really what's driving that or fueling the online giving growth. And this is actually pretty unique to Canada. We did the same type of thing in the US, and we found a little bit of the opposite, where a lot of the growth in online giving, which we are seeing, is being fueled by more volume, more transactions, even though people are giving less. So we did see a comeback in May, and I'm not in the prediction business, but I would guess that the average gift will actually start to go down a little bit more as we get into the summer, and as the economic reality really starts to hit people. There's a kind of an initial bump where people are really generous. Let's meet the call, let's rise to it. And then at some point, you run out of money, you get tired, you have your own financial constraints. So I hope this trend continues, but I would guess that it actually wouldn't. So anyways, what we're seeing is that there's not necessarily that many more people giving, but those that are giving are actually being more generous on average when it comes to online. So giving is up. No, that's not what I'm saying. Online giving is up quite definitively. But when we look at overall giving, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing this, this is Imagine Canada's report coming from Q1. Charities are struggling in Canada when it comes to overall revenue. 2/3 roughly are seeing quite significant decreases across all organization sizes. So yes, online's growing. How much of that is a shift from other channels like direct mail? It's really hard for us to say, but overall, charities in Canada are struggling. Nonprofits in the US are really struggling. So I don't want to think that, hey, everything's all rosy. Look at how much money everyone's raising. No, online giving is growing for sure. It's growing even faster now, but overall giving is down. So that's kind of like what's happening in terms of giving and online, but what are organizations doing in terms of their email? Well, we see that email volume has been trending up, and then we did see a spike around Giving Tuesday now, the first week of May. But especially since COVID hit, there's a bit of a pause at first, and then you can see that spike at kind of the end of March, and then that trend has generally continued on, although we're starting to see a slight decline. And email volume increased across pretty much every vertical. These are slightly different verticals than the one Canada Helps tracks. And people are sending more relevant messages. You can see no one was talking about COVID at all until about middle of March. And then we saw a big spike, and it's flatlined a little bit. And now we're starting to see a little bit of organizations moving away from COVID-related messaging. But the percent of emails asking for money has stayed relatively consistent, again, absent that spike around Giving Tuesday now, which a lot of organizations sent a lot of email and a lot of them were asking for money. So the mix of emails hasn't really changed that dramatically, even as volume has grown. So this increase of volume is actually one of the reasons why online giving has been growing, is people have been sending more emails. People have been responding to emails more on desktop, where there's normally a 3 times higher conversion rate, which leads to more giving and more generosity. So those are some of the things that we see. But this idea of more good emails to more engaged people, it works in COVID and out of COVID. And I'd say one of the highest kind of takeaways that I've seen is good fundraising is good fundraising. It's not like we went into a global pandemic and everything we know about human behavior has suddenly changed. There's obviously things that have changed in our lives, but humans fundamentally and why we give hasn't changed just because there's a global pandemic. And so the things that we saw that worked outside of a pandemic are the same things that work inside a pandemic. All right, so that's just kind of a snapshot of where we are and what seems to be happening. But how do you actually go about optimizing and improving your emails? And here's what we want to do is first understand how donors use and respond to email. If you remember that quiz, oftentimes we're guessing from what we think is our own experience. But what we need to do is really understand, how do donors actually use their email and respond? Once we know that, well, now we can optimize these key components in our email. So that's really what I want to do today. So there's really 10 different components to an email. I don't have time to go over all of them, but you've got 5 that really compose what we call the email envelope. These are the things that lead someone to open an email: sender, reply, send time, subject line, preview text. These are the things that you see in your inbox, probably Gmail, probably on your mobile device, and you make that snap decision. Do I want to open, delete, flag, star, whatever you might do. And then on the other side, we have these other elements where once you get into the email body, this is when you see the design. How are you greeted? What does the copy or the text say? What's the overall tone and what's the call to action? So today, again, we don't have time to cover all these. I'm just going to kind of highlight these 5 fairly quickly to see how can you use these 5 elements to improve and optimize your email. So let's get into it. First is the sender. So here's the challenge. Here's an inbox. I don't know about you, my inbox is absolute nightmare. There's so many emails going on. There's so many unreads. It's a dumpster fire. But how do you actually stand out in this in an inbox to actually get someone to pause and think about opening your email in the first place? Here's the strategy I'd suggest: to send emails from a person. If you remember this experiment where the email that was sent from a person saw a 20% increase in email opens. Now, why does this work? Well, again, let's understand, how do people manage their inbox? And we do a few things. One is we just triage. There's no way that we have the time to sit down and read every single email subject line and who is it from, right? We are cruising through our email inboxes. We are moving quick. So we have to make these snap decisions, and we can only do that by something called impression. So now impression is really how we make decisions at like a subconscious level, right? So our conscious brain processes information like 16 to 60 bits per second. Our subconscious is cranking on information, almost 11 million bits of information. So when we make these decisions about opening or deleting or flagging, we don't even actually know what we're doing. We've just so trained that we're making these quick decisions at a subconscious level. And so these folks, Litmus and Fluent, wanted to see, well, how do people make these snap decisions? And they found that the number one thing that most people use to triage their inbox is who an email is from. It's the first thing that we look for when we're scanning, is who is it from? And when we generally see brands or organizations, we don't have a positive affinity towards them. They're going to market, they're going to sell, it won't be valuable. Whereas we see a name, there's something human, conversational about it, and we're more likely to actually engage with it. So it leads to more opens. So here's a test: organization name versus person's name, comma, organization. Just by adding in the person's name here, they saw a 38% increase in opens. So if you're like, oh, I don't think we can send from just a person, that's crazy. Well, maybe you can send from a person, comma, organization, and try that first. Or maybe if you've proven, hey, sending from a person does work, or we have seen some success, well, who should it come from? It doesn't always have to come from the same person, the ED, the CEO. In this case, this is the exact same email, exact same subject line. They just changed who the sender was in this case, coming from a vice president instead of president, and they saw an 85% increase in email opens. Now, there's some novelty effect, like, oh, I normally get emails from Albert, and now this one came from Joanne, and there's nothing really wrong with novelty effect. What you don't want to happen is the opposite of novelty, where everyone sees, oh, Albert, oh, I know what email that's going to be. I know exactly what it is. I don't need to open and read it, right? You're trying to engage donors and stay fresh in their minds so that they'll actually read your email. And this not only led to email opens, but way more in donations, right? So who in your organization can actually best send that email? It's not always going to be the one person. So you've got some of that benefit, and also you can just stand up from others. When we look at thousands of emails, especially in Canada, 77% of emails that we receive from Canadian charities are sent from an organization, which means when you look at that inbox and how do you stand out, the vast majority are sending emails that don't look like this, right? Most come from GFA, TIFF, UNICEF. Very few have a human name tied behind it. So it has all these different elements of standing out, how we process an inbox, more personal, conversational feel and vibe to it. And here's the thing, just test it. It's such an easy thing to say, we normally send from this person, let's send it from this person. Now, ideally, that would be in this form of a true experiment and test where you send the same email to 2 separate groups of people in an A/B test. But maybe you don't have that capability, maybe you're too small, then maybe this is worth something that you should try. Continuing to do the same things that we always do and expecting a different result, right? That's the definition of insanity. So how can you do something different? Maybe you can send from a different person or just from an individual. It's one way that you can look to optimize and improve your emails. All right, so that's how maybe we can get opens. I want to spend more time of like, well, what happens after someone actually opens an email? So here's the tip number 1, remove design. Just gonna pause for a sec, just remove design. Now, you may be like, what are you talking about? Or designers are like throwing up right now. But here's the thing, if you remember some of these experiments, moving away, big logo, big button, removed, huge increase in donations. Well, let's throw a video in. People love videos. They like to click videos, but videos often don't lead to conversions in donations. So videos are awesome, probably not the best when you're asking and looking for someone to make a donation on that page or from that email. The idea here is if the design doesn't definitively help, remove it. We've stuffed our emails so full of stuff, logos, hero images, supporting images, big buttons, with very little evidence or proof that that actually helps people engage with the email and move to a donation. So let's take the opposite approach. Until we know it helps, let's not add it. And so you might end up with an email like this. This is the type of email that we send with our clients on the consulting side. And this is actually kind of what we teach when it comes to our teaching and training, is this plain email that maybe looks ugly. This is an optimized email for us based on research and testing. And you may be saying like, ugh, and that is gross. I don't think I could do that. We just finished the last season of Schitt's Creek as well. Great gifts for Schitt's Creek. Great show too. But here's the other thing. Just test it. This is also a super simple test. Write your email like normal, throw it into your email tool like normal. That's your control. Remove all those design elements. That's your treatment. Send it out and see what donors respond to. That's one of the things that we do with our clients all the time. We actually have a hard time convincing people, even though we have so much evidence to say this will help. There's so much resistance. Oh, what about our brand? And I don't like emails that look like that. Who cares about your brand and who cares about what you look like? What do donors respond to? That's what we have to be so focused on. So we were lucky to convince a public radio station, again in the US, to run this experiment. This is an NPR station. Pretty strong brand. Here was the control and here was the treatment. That's what they did. They just, same email, removed all those design elements. More clicks on design, more donations on conversion, which led to more revenue on average. So here's the thing, I've shown some US examples. This is not just a US thing, it's a human thing. Now, unfortunately, very, very, very few Canadian charities send personal emails like this. About 3% is what we've seen. Very, very, very few Canadian charities test, unfortunately. And very, 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 very few Canadian charities document and share their tests. So I put this out on LinkedIn as like, hey, is anyone testing this? Because I see very few Canadian charities actually doing this. And so some responses that we saw, Eric Rebido from Yibu Digital said, hey, we test this a lot. We had a couple massive wins, but sometimes it flopped. So that's another thing. This is no guarantee that this will work 100% of the time for 100% of the people listening. But in general, most of the time in aggregate, this does work. This is why we're suggesting it. And that's all Canadian data that they've done. Alvina Wong works for the Union Gospel Mission out in Vancouver. We've tested plain text emails and they've done well for click-throughs and conversions. That's great. Cassandra Steele, we've tested it and seen better results. Awesome. Greenpeace Canada moved towards this pretty plain email style, and they've seen huge revenue growth since they've employed that strategy. Kim Rossi, we tried this a couple times last month, so more opens and clicks than ever before. We do this all the time at our organization. Engagement's increased, and we've seen better results. This isn't a US thing. This is a human thing. And I wish each and every one of those organizations would actually have a documented test to share with me so I could share with you, but we don't. So if you do test this, can you please let me share that so that I can show Canadian examples and experiments and not always have to show US ones? The key point here is just remove design unless you know for sure it helps. This isn't a US thing, this is a human thing. All right, so that's design. Remove that design. How do you use copy? Well, I'm suggesting you actually probably need more copy, more text in your email than you think. And this should serve a purpose. But if you're wondering, well, how long should an email be? A question we get asked all the time. The email needs to be as long as it needs to be. So there's a crappy answer for you. But look at this test. Option A here had about 560 words. Option B had 2,200 words in the email and actually saw 100% increase in donations. Shorter does not equal better. What we'll often see is something like this: shorter email on the left, longer email on the right, more clicks, way more donations, and more generosity on average. Longer email on the left, shorter email on the right, way more clicks, no difference in overall revenue, even though they had so many more people visit the landing page and people were less generous. The goal of the email isn't to just get a click for fundraising, it's to get a motivated click. So longer is better. No. Let me pause. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying what your email needs to do, it has to answer this question. If I'm your ideal donor, why should I give to you rather than someone else, or just continue on with my day? And if you're trying to answer this question in a meaningful way, you probably need a little bit more copy and text than you think to answer that question. So how can you actually use that copy in your emails that lead to donations? One of the things that we saw in Canada when we did a research project, we saw that about 40% of emails were not very clear at all with what our donation will do. Clarity is one of the most critical components of fundraising. Just be simple and clear with what my donation will do. It's the easiest thing for everyone listening right now to do in your emails, is be clear. And yet, 40% of the time, it was not clear to us. So here's a structure that hopefully you can help in your emails to provide more clarity. One, you have to have a problem. So in this, what I'm walking through, I'll walk through 4 elements. We normally walk through 7 or even 8, but again, don't have full time. So I'm just highlighting the most important ones. One, there has to be a problem to solve. If there's no problem to solve, there's no reason to give. So the suggestion is introduce the problem and why you're emailing someone fairly early on. This needs to be quite clear and quite concise. Again, you will have a long email, which doesn't mean you spend a long time on everything. A long email means you have to address a certain amount of things, and that takes a certain amount of copy. But how do you address clearly and concisely that there is a problem? So on the right, if you want to read, this is like a made-up child manners charity that we use for teaching purposes. But unless you're at the very end of a campaign where you've already emailed people 3, 4, 5 times and they kind of understand who you are and what's going on, that email could probably be a little bit shorter. But generally speaking, people need some more time to understand what is the actual problem that you solve, right? So many organizations go, oh, we help kids, we provide hope, please give today. I don't know what the problem is. You haven't articulated what your problem actually is. Kids need help, fine, but what type of kids? Why do they need my help, right? Clearly and concisely say, here's the problem that needs to be solved. Then you can offer the solution, right? This is what actually inspires a donor to give, saying there's a problem, oh, but there's a solution that I can make through you. This is key. We'll come back to how to position language, but I'm the one who wants to make an impact. You're the vehicle that I'm able to do it through. So that's how we have to position the solution, right? The solution is, it can be any number of different things. You may want to use bullet points, right? When you make a donation of X, that will then do A, B, and C. But here's where you actually say, here's the solution that we have to the problem that we just told you about, right? Problem creates the gap in a donor's mind. There's something for them to do, but they still need to figure out, well, how does my donation help solve that problem? Make that connection. Here's how your donation today will make a difference, and try to be very specific and very tangible. There's a lot of research around tangibility being linked to generosity. Donors fundamentally want their donation to be used for a good purpose. And the more we talk in vagaries and don't provide a clear solution, the less likely they are to give. So again, clarity trumps persuasion. Clear problem, now clear solution. Now, how do you build trust? Just because you say you're going to do something doesn't necessarily mean that I trust your ability to do that. Now, there's all different types of ways that we can do to build trust, but these are reasons why your organization can actually carry out that work, right? There's a lot of different organizations. Why are you better than anyone else? Or just why should I trust that you can actually do that work? So this is where we can use things like seals, Imagine Canada. You can use donor testimonials, right? That's a great way for people to see, oh, person's been a donor and they really trust and respect them. This is where you can use some past examples of impact or success, right? Over the past 3 months, we've been able to do A, B, and C, right? These are all different ways that you can actually build trust. Now, trust isn't the reason why someone gives, right? Trust makes them feel more confident about the donation that they want to make. So this is where trust kind of supports your argument, right? Problem, solution, here's why you should be able to trust us. And then there has to be a clear way for me to act now. We'll talk a little bit more afterwards about being very, very clear and direct with the actual link that you use. But this is where you can add some urgency or some incentives through kind of inward and external rewards. So this could be in the form of something like a match, right? Your gift today will be matched. This could be a timeline, these funds must be given by the end of the month. You could have a goal, where we're 80% of the way to this goal. These are all different inward kind of incentives that increase urgency. Because the reality is, your organization is going to have the similar problem and a similar solution 3 weeks from now. Generally speaking, right? Most of us aren't going to achieve our missions in the next, 3-4 months. So how do you provide an incentive or a reason for someone to give today as opposed to go on with their business? And this is an opportunity to do some of those types of things, whether it's time-bound, goal-bound, match-bound. These are ways to actually provide some of those incentives to act today. So let's look at a real example from a real Canadian charity that we received, and how are they actually doing this? So here's what the email looks like. It's from the United Way of the Lower Mainland, my former homeland. So first things first, how could you, based on something we've already talked about, improve this email just by looking at it? Remove some design. Hopefully you said, I can't actually hear what you're saying, but hopefully you said remove design. So let's get rid of that huge hero image and let's get rid of this bag of groceries. Why not just send an email that looks like this? All right, so this is more of a design optimized email. So now let's look at some of the copy. What I like about this email as an example is that it's good but not great, and it doesn't exactly follow our template, which isn't the point. It's not like saying you have to do this exactly the same way, but what you do have to have is a problem. So you can see that it's not as linear and sequential as the template that we provided, but here's the problem pretty early on in the email. 98% of nonprofit community partners have seen an increased demand and can't meet the needs. That is a very clear, concise, easily understood problem, right? And then they also talk about how more needs to be done. Families are still going hungry. So the first is a bit of a stat. The second one starts tying it to families. So clear problem. Nicely done. United Way, Lower Mainland, if you're listening, nicely done. All right, solution. Well, here's why food is actually critical. There's people that rely on this at no cost as they're facing economic difficulties. There's this campaign that will actually expand this so that 50 United Ways do this. And then that copy in that last third, that third arrow is pointing at, really starts hitting home again. You're helping a friend and neighbor, this really communal aspect. One of the advantages of a regional organization like United Ways, they can talk very specifically about their region. So one suggestion would actually be to talk more about Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley, Langley, those types of terms, because that's what makes them kind of unique. So, talk more specifically as you can. But here's the solution. Expand, provide more food at no cost to people who need it, like your friends, families, and neighbors. So there's the solution. The act now, we'll come back to this, but please support our relief fund today. Not the best reason to act now, right? There's some urgency around providing food, which is great, but in terms of drawing that connection for why a donation should be made today, there's some work that can be done. And then they actually have a trust sentence early on. So they've already said, to date, support has helped launch and operate 20 United Local Ways, right? So it's kind of saying, we're already meeting some of this needs. We actually need to expand further. So there is a little bit of trust factor of saying we're already having an impact. We try to do more. So they're trying to get at trust a little bit. So you can see how they have those elements: problem, solution, act now, and trust. Are they perfect? No, but they're there. And are they in the right order? Maybe, maybe not, but they're there. That's the key thing. I can't tell you how many emails that we look at and read, and there's no problem. It's just all solution. Well, great. You don't need my money then. Or it's all problem, no solution. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do, right? Or there's no trust. Well, why should I give you my 50 bucks and someone else? Or no reason to act now that actually makes me respond today. Problem, solution, trust, act now. 4 key things that should be in a fundraising email. All right, so that's kind of how you use your copy, but here's another tip. Just have a more personal, human tone in that copy itself. So we already talked about removing design elements. This organization ran that experiment, saw it for themselves. Hey, remove design element. Then they got thinking, well, can we take this even further? Like, what if we actually removed more design elements, but carried on this, personal looking, sounding, feeling approach even more so in an email? And saw another huge increase in donations. And I'll put these side by side and you can see what they did. 1, logo. People generally don't care about your logo. Let's just put it at the bottom. It's definitely not the thing that you want to see first and foremost when you open up an email. Generally speaking, it's not some big logo. If they want it for trust and brand, great. Let's put it at the bottom, not at the very top. For the call to action button, instead of having a button, they actually made it a hyperlink. When you send an email to your friends and family, you're not coding a button, you're using a hyperlink or maybe even a raw link. So they said, let's do that. And then it's really the tone here. And I'll read this out loud as it's one way to really get a sense of tone. But on the left, no introduction, just when your world has been turned upside down, every connection counts, every bit of strength, every heart brought together. It's kind of like beautiful prose, but it's very much talking at me versus, I know you've been using CaringBridge recently to stay connected to your loved ones, and I hope it's been a source of strength for you. Which one of those sounds like an email that you would get in the course of your everyday? Which one of those sounds like an email that you're more likely to kind of keep reading? Probably the one on the right, and it continues on, right? Right now we're in a short campaign versus the one on the left launches into this narrative about Erica, who I don't know, and her son Graham, who I don't know, and it still hasn't told me, why are you emailing me? What's going on, right? So the other one has this more personal tone, but it's also more empathetic in saying, I know your inbox is full, so here's why I'm emailing you. As opposed to, I'm 2 paragraphs in, I still don't know what you're talking about or why you're emailing me. So it's more human and it introduces the reason for the email. It's also got this magic word in fundraising, you. Look at on the left, when your world versus on the right, you've, your, you. If all you do in fundraising copy is just use the word you more, you'll probably have more success. Now, there's a lot more that goes into it and how do we develop narrative and how do we be more involving with people in the copy, but one of the quick tricks is to just use the word you more. And when we stack it all up, design plus copy plus tone saw this huge increase in donations. And so when we look back at this example, you can see they have some of those good things, right? It's written first person. I hope you and your family, right? I'm saddened. It's signed off by an individual. I don't know why we always include those digital signatures and emails, but so be it. Probably get rid of that. But it's first person, it's personal, it's more human in tone, but they also have a lot of this. Our nonprofit community. Why not just say your community, right? Our relief fund. Why does that be your relief fund? Just the relief fund. Help us launch. I don't want to help you. I want to help provide food for people. Take yourself out of the equation. Our goal is to raise $1 million. I don't care about your goal. I don't care about $1 million. I care about providing food to people in my community, right? We do this all the time where we unintentionally make us the center or the hero, to use a kind of overused term, the center or the hero of the story when it has to be positioned in the mind of the donor. So one tip or trick is like write your email like normal, read it out loud. You'll sound if you're talking, you'll hear yourself talking about yourself all the time, or you'll hear yourself, it's talking like a robot or not like a human. Just read it out loud or a colleague next to you, and you can just hear it, you can feel it, and then you can go back and maybe rewrite the copy in text. And then the last quick tip here is have a very clear direct call to action. You've already seen this play out in a few ways in experiments, but one of them is this first one, which was a design test, but also look at the call to action right away. See that donate button at the very top? And they have this one sentence. Is that enough information for me to make a decision? Probably not. I might click it, but I'm not ready to give. Only the small percentage of super highly motivated donors will click that button and make a donation. Right? Then they have a little bit more copy and then another call to action. right? Whereas on this one, it's taking this time, problem, solution, trust, act now. Now you're ready to give. Here's where you can do it. And they have it at the end of the email and just once. Whether you do that all the way or not, you have to make sure that the call to action is after you've given enough reason to give. Again, you don't want to click, you want a motivated click. And we see this all the time. Make your year-end gift today versus something soft like stand with us. More clicks, fewer donations. Where you can securely give your gift versus find out more. Both times goes to a donation page. More clicks, I'd rather find out more than make a donation. Oh, but you're asking me for a donation? I don't want to make a donation. Fewer donations. Again, if you go back to this act now, please support our relief fund today. This could be definitely improved. One, maybe use a raw link, actually show the URL. We've seen that works, but there's a better way. With your support today can provide food in your community. Make a secure gift here, right? It's a more clear, reemphasizes the main objective of the email and then calls me to action. But be clear, be direct, be specific. Motivated clicks is your job. All right, so quick recap on these 5 ways to optimize your fundraising. Send from a person, not an organization, and maybe even different types of people within your org. Your design elements definitely help. If not, remove it. Do you have enough copy to explain why a donation is needed? Clear problem, clear solution, clear reason to trust, clear reason to act. Can you use a more personal tone and voice? Read it out loud and make sure you have a clear, direct, straightforward call to action. Those are things that I think you should be able to do to improve and optimize your emails. So they clicked, job done, right? We send a motivated click to the landing page. No, incorrect. More Schitt's Creek gifts. No, incorrect. Also, I don't just do Schitt's Creek gifts for Canadian audiences. I do it all the time in the US. Anyways, incorrect. Job isn't done. Your donation page is where you actually complete the conversion, where you actually take in the money. It has to do 2 things. Set the context and continue the conversation. Make sure your donation page sets the context and continues the conversation. And here's what I mean. So here's an experiment. Again, it's US, wish it was Canada. This isn't a US thing, this is a human thing. Here's the email. Here's where they're talking about the problem and solution, right? They're actually referencing a blog that they have, and it's very well read, and we need more support so that we can continue doing the blog. They don't position it that way, right? It's your support is needed to provide news and information to people who need it. Anyways, they're talking about this resource. Resource. That's a hard word to say a bunch of times, but that's what they're talking about. And then you go to the donation page, and what do you not see is the resource. It's barely mentioned anywhere. It's mentioned actually once on that whole page. So you just spent all this time, problem, solution, trust, act now, on this one thing. I click, I go to the donation page, nowhere to be found. Versus, let's actually change the logo to be the resource logo. Let's put it right in the headline, talk about the resource. Let's put it right in the first paragraph, and let's talk about it throughout the rest of the copy, throughout the page. Just talking about the same thing. This isn't rocket science. You said it in an email, just continue saying it on your donation page. And here's what is crazy about this experiment. Huge increase in donations, plus big increase in average gift, which means a massive increase in revenue from the same flippin' email. All they did was point to a more contextual donation page that could continue the conversation. Now, this sounds basic, but almost half of Canadian charities that we looked at don't do this. They talk to us about one thing and they point us to either a general donation page or something else that talks about something different, right? Another example, I mentioned our optimized version of an email that looks like this. Here's the donation page. This is a Catholic charity, right? Set the logo, I'm in the right place. This is the donation page, right? Set the logo, I'm in the right place. Talks about light a candle, talk about light a candle, right? Setting the context, continuing the conversation. They actually go into a little bit more detail about what candle lighting means within the Catholic tradition. Then it's actually some of the exact same language here. Provide ongoing physical, spiritual care to people around the world. Provide ongoing spiritual care to people around the world. It's the same sentence even. And then $15 donation, $15 donation, $15 donation, some more consistency in the ask amount. This is how we need to be creating donation pages that our emails are pointing from. The key point here is contextualization and continuity. You have to be pointing to a donation page that sets the context and continues the conversation. So that's tip number 6. Now maybe say, wait, that's only 6. Well, this is a bit of a cop-out, but I've said it a bunch. Test and try it for yourself. For whatever reason, we get very risk averse about things and we're not willing to try, and we sit around boardrooms and, well, I think and I like, and the board member says this. And just try some of this stuff for your own self. Hopefully it can be a true test. If not, try some of this for yourself, see what happens, be curious, try something new and different, and see the results. Prove it for yourself. That's tip number 7 for you. So we have some time for questions here. If you want to go deeper, one of the things to look at is this Canadian Charity COVID-19 response page. Again, Canada Helps, Charity Village, ourselves, and Care2. The online giving data is updated every month, and the emails are updated in real time. And you can actually see email examples that other Canadian charities are sending, both in the past and right now. So you can actually scan them. Hopefully this GIF works. You can view it, click it, and you'll actually see the email that organization is sending. Just because they're doing it doesn't mean it's working, right? Remember, there's always room to improve, but you can see examples of what organizations are doing. And then if you're interested in any of this other research and training, or want to go deeper in email or all this other stuff, I think the best place for you to go from our side, nextafter.com/institute, nextafter.com/institute. We've got free research, free resources, and some paid training online and virtually that you can look at. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for coming. Hopefully you found something in there useful. And if you have any questions that we can't get to, or something that you didn't ask, that's my email, brady@nextafter.com. Please feel free to send me an email. I will do my absolute best to respond.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Brady. So now it's time for the question and answers period. If you haven't already done so, please feel free to go into that questions log and log in your question. We've already received some really great questions that we'll kind of get to and kick things off. So the first one that I kind of flagged that I want to bring up to you, Brady, was more around speaking to the challenges online marketers are facing as we navigate the time of COVID-19 and civil unrest. Do you have any advice or tips for navigating that?
Oh, man, it's such an interesting time to be doing what we're doing. What I would say, generally speaking, is when the world is crazy and up and down, one of the best things you can do is be consistent. Trying to match up your own messaging and kind of, matching up the chaos with your own chaos is really, really difficult. There's no guarantee that it'll work. So for the most part, it's kind of continue on doing the things that you know will work. Acquiring emails, sending emails, talking about the reasons why donations are needed, kind of like go back to basics. And then once we know more information about maybe donors or trends, then you can make adjustments to strategy. But especially in such quick moving, tumultuous times, trying to adjust strategy and tactic too quick is often not a good recipe. So again, if I knew exactly what to do, then I would be a lot more confident and I'd be on the news and stuff. I don't know if anyone really knows, but I do think that's one of the common threads is what worked outside will work now. Get back to basics and be consistent.
Great, thank you. Moving more towards the tactical side of things, I think one question we've gotten is more so around the subject lines. So one question we received was, what are some examples of enticing subject lines that we could use in our appeals?
Yeah, great question. So we didn't get into subject line. We spend like a whole hour on subject line. We have a subject line tip sheet. But one of the easiest ways is to use the word you or their name actually in a subject line. So we did analysis of subject lines, and we found that appealing to a conversation or signifying that this email is worth opening through conversational cues is more applicable to nonprofits and charities. And then there's 5 main ways to do it. And one of them is like use a merge tag with their name. So you write your subject line and then you add my name, right? Special news for you, Brady. Or you just use the word you. Again, we're so egocentric without knowing it. When we see our name, when we see the word you, that really stands out. And then the other thing is kind of mystery. You don't want to have like a bait and switch scenario, right? When it's like, win a free cruise, and you open it and it's like a donation appeal. There needs to be some consistencies, but when you have an element of mystery or intrigue, it often leads us to open or make a click. So the idea is write a subject line out that is very direct and very clear with what's in the email, and then try to remove just a little snippet of information so there's that little element of mystery, and then maybe you can add in my name or you in there as well. So you plus mystery is one of the tactics that we've seen that can work for subject lines.
Awesome, thank you. Next question I have here is, do you recommend creating a different email for each audience segment? And what are the best segmentation and tips for doing that?
Man, we could spend a lot of time on segmentation. So generally speaking, yeah, I mean, the more segmented and highly personal you can be, the better. What always it comes down to is, time, capacity, data. So one of the most natural segments is kind of donor versus non-donor. You can choose whether you want to send that ask or appeal based on someone who's given fairly recently. Maybe you just want to send them reporting or cultivation content. But also, you would talk to a donor, a recent donor in particular, probably different than someone who's never given to your organization. That's one of the key life cycle segmentations, is donor versus non-donor. And not every email needs to be segmented that way, right? You have some more news and information, some updates and programs that can go to everyone maybe in the same way. But when you do appeals, perhaps you want to reference their past gift. You want to talk about the impact of their past donation. Those things we've seen be effective to donors and lapsed donors. Well, then, you need to have that segment as donors, and then non-donors you would talk to differently.
Awesome, thank you. Couple of questions. So first question around, are there particular fonts that are preferable? Is there a benefit to making the font size greater than 12, for example? And then kind of different, but tied to that, thoughts on like emojis and using those in emails.
So we actually tested emoji because we get asked all the time, and it was no difference. There's really no benefit of emojis. It's highly unpredictable. It doesn't tell you a lot about the donors. It's a low-level test. If you want to use them, great, but we've seen no evidence that they actually help. Especially, no real evidence. So use them, don't use them, who cares? Doesn't really matter. In terms of fonts, there is a little evidence that larger font sizes can help with readership. Again, the average online donor is actually a little bit older. If you have to target people, you should target, older people, even online. And so they have worse eyes, and then, bigger fonts work. So there's a little bit behind that. Font size is actually a fairly low level thing, as long as you avoid like terrible non-web safe fonts. For the most part, use your kind of, Arial's web safe fonts. Maybe make them a little bit bigger, but that's also such a minor thing in the grand scheme of email, that it's not going to be a huge difference, again, as long as you have a web safe font, which you should.
Awesome. Are there ways to, Glenn wants to know, are there ways to change the name in the sent email so that person's first name is sure to show up in the sender line?
Yeah. So any email program that's worth its salt has a merge tag function that you should be able to put in the subject line itself. And it's the same type of merge tag that you use to say, hi, Brady. Now, obviously, that puts a lot more pressure on your data. Do you have that data somewhere? And can you actually get it into your email program? But it's names and being personal is so hugely important that we suggest anytime you acquire an email address, you should be acquiring the name, at least first name. It's not adding extra information or personal. There's no difference in conversion rate by asking for someone's name. And then you can do this. You can say, hi, Brady. How's it going, Brady? Here's an email for you, Brady, to use that tactic. And if your email program doesn't allow you to merge tag, then you need a new email program.
On the topic of email programs, we've always gotten a lot of questions from charities on, which ones to use. Are they all the same? Do you have any thoughts around that whole topic and the notion of different results with different programs?
Yeah, I mean, tons of opinions. Two things I'd say is one, you should probably be using like an email program. A lot of times CRMs or donation tools will also send emails. Some of them are good, but they're more often or more likely to be bad at sending emails because they're trying to do a bunch of things. So normally like dedicated email tools like MailChimp or Campaign Monitor. We use HubSpot personally with a lot of our clients. It's more expensive, but it's amazing. Those types of email specific programs that are built to deliver email are going to be way better than the kind of all-in-one solution. And then for smaller charities, I know it's often like Constant Contact, MailChimp, and I'm very pro MailChimp and somewhat anti Constant Contact. That's maybe personal preference. There's just some features in MailChimp that I think are better too.
Awesome, thank you. Rosemary wants to know, longer is better, but what are the chances someone will read through a longer email than a shorter one, especially in an era where folks don't like reading much?
I'd say did you just listen to this webinar? What I'm saying is what we think often isn't reality. So, oh, people won't read long copy. Well, have you seen some of the most read blog articles? They are massive. And is your goal to get someone to click a link or actually engage and make a donation? So again, the point isn't long versus short. The point is you have to provide problem, solution, trust, act now, and communicate that in an effective way where people understand it. And that's very difficult to do in a short email. So you probably need more copy than you think. And this is the challenge, again, of just writing based on your own perspective, getting a board member or someone else to approve it, is we all suffer from the curse of knowledge. So we look at stuff and we're like, oh, it looks great, super, makes sense. You send it to a donor and they're like, what the heck are you talking about? So this is why research, evidence, and testing is so important. If someone can show me that super short emails always lead to more donations, then great, I'll happily change my stance. But generally speaking, in aggregate, most of the time, you need more copy to more clearly explain why a donation is needed, which will lead to more donations.
Awesome, thank you. So we have time for 2 more questions. Next question is, how can we tell if our design images, design/images are or are not having an impact? Is this just by testing one email or another with just that one change? How do you know what has made the difference?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it is a super easy test, right? Write your email just like normal with the image that you normally have, and then the other version, you remove the image and see what's the impact of the image. Again, you're optimizing ideally for donations and not just for clicks. But what's really going on with images is images are actually really difficult to control the message of, right? One person sees a smiling kid and they go, charity doesn't need my help. There's no need here. Someone else sees a really, sad picture and goes, ugh, that charity's manipulating me, right? So it's really difficult to control what people actually extract from an image. So we have seen some examples where a really strong supporting image, like if you're talking about a hurricane disaster in an area and you show a supporting image, not a big hero image, but like to the right and smaller of the area that's been a disaster, well, that makes sense. It supports the copy. We have seen that occasionally be a benefit, but more often than not, a hero image almost never works. And it's really difficult to control the connection of the supporting image, which is why it's generally just advised and safer to not use any image and just rely on your copy and text, where you have a lot more control over what you say and how people interpret it.
Awesome. Got a couple of questions around, is there a good time or a better time of the day to send emails, or even a day of the week? How would you kind of address that scenario where a charity is not, a charity wants to optimize their bang for the buck in terms of sending their emails?
It's an awesome question. I actually just posted on LinkedIn this morning to see if people had other data and information, because we look at that in all of our studies, Canada, the US, verticals, higher ed, public radio, whatever it might be. And almost everyone sends emails at the same time. It's about 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central, or Central is when we do the analysis, but it's pretty much local time. 50 to 60% of all emails are sent within that time window. But when you look at likelihood of people to give, it's often early afternoon, and we see higher average gift in early afternoon. And we'll often see a higher average gift on the weekend. And when the few emails that we have seen occasionally, they have a higher conversion rate on the weekend. So 2 things. 1, you'll get less opens and clicks if you send later in the day and on weekends. But again, if your goal is donations and revenue, it's maybe worth testing. The other thing is we've done some testing. The one person that got back to me earlier today that does a lot of testing, almost all of the tests that we've ran is largely inconclusive. Whether you send it in the morning or in the afternoon or on the weekend, it's really, really difficult to get a valid result in a consistent basis, which is why me and almost everyone else doesn't have a good answer to that question. So I would like to try early afternoon and weekend because no one else is sending emails. So I have a better chance of standing out. So I'd suggest that if I was running a charity, I would test that because everyone else is sending at pretty much the same times.
Amazing, thank you. And on that note, we're going to close the Q&A portion of today's webinar. I want to thank all of you for submitting your questions, amazing questions that led to some great discussions with Brady. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have left for today's webinar. Want to extend a thank you to Brady for taking the time today to deliver some great insights and best practices for creating more optimized fundraising emails.
So to stay updated on more about Canada Helps' fundraising products, tips, and free webinars, such as today's webinar, be sure to follow us on Twitter at CharityLifeCA, our company page on LinkedIn, and on Facebook at Canada Helps for Charities. As always, thank you to all of our attendees for joining. We hope that you could join us for our next webinar. In the meanwhile, please stay safe and take care, everyone.